Okay, we'll see how this goes. I realized that trying to compare a poem and a piece of visual art or photography is ridiculous. And it's also contextual, right? Depends on who we're talking to. Now, if we remember the Scott McCloud reading, he was talking about seeing ourselves in the grills of automobiles and soda cans and that kinds of things. And, you know, if you think about two-dimensional representation, which I'll talk about later, it really is a trick of the mind or the eye to be looking at something and feel a sense of like, rapture or some kind of a sense of like wandering or imagination. To read something with that level of sophistication is it's akin to storytelling. So just something to think about. And I'm going to make the assertion to you guys that we understand less about how pictures work than we think. And it would be sort of like asking someone when they learn to play an instrument, right? I heard this on a TED Talk, which I'll link. It's actually kind of cool. And he says, yeah, people ask you when you started to learn an instrument, but they don't ask you when you started speaking a language. So I'm going to presume that what you make is going to be initially really informed by what you consume with your eyes, right? And so one of the big questions that a field of study called semiotics was after was, how does this meaning thing become a real thing? How does it get generated? Or is it real at all? And then it gets kind of, philosophical and fuzzy. So the question I'm posing is there a correlation between how we read text and how we read art? And for the sake of trying to make something visible to us, I'm gonna presume that the world is something we read, which is very postmodern, okay, as opposed to something that we coexist with, right? But I'm on both pages. So semiotics is a study of signs, signifiers, and the signified, and I'll go over this in detail later. And the codes. So a code would be like a language, and then the elements of the code would be words, and then you could cut that down further into letters, and then into like phonemes and that kind of thing, like how letters sound in particular situations, whether or not there has a sound that indicates gender or not, and so on. Okay, semiosis is that activity of shared understanding through some kind of a code. It could be different codes intermeshing, or it could be music, or, it could be anything. Now, recently, not that recently, but about, let's say 200-300 years ago, the Enlightenment kicked in, and you start having a real shift in the way people think about the roles of creativity versus, say, the role of natural philosophy, which is like science. And both, or actually the multitudes of ways of knowing, which are called epistemologies, have conventions that they use to communicate with like-minded people. And some of these conventions that they use are really, really specific to what they're doing, and to the outside world can be kind of convoluted and almost seem like a secret language that's being used. And I wanted to show you some of the conventions that are used to communicate meaning through art. The first one is metaphor. There's another slideshow with this same exact definition, but it has different, maybe it has different images. This is an artist named Do Ho Se, and I thought it was a nice example of a metaphor because he is South Korean, I think, and has moved to the United States and is now a citizen of the United States. And much of his work revolves around, ideas about home and ideas about migration, ideas about rootedness and ancestry and that kind of thing. So the metaphor, this is a giant piece that's made out of individual dog tags. And they're all, as you can see, it goes all the way back, and you begin to walk upon the dog tags, and presumably the dog tags represent an individual, right? So he got a dog tag machine and made each one individually, and I think different.